I've been in some congregations where the song service was flat, dull, boring. It sounded like kind of a funeral dirge, sort of just going through the motions. And I'm really glad that we do not have that situation here. If there's anybody in Newton that does not know that God is alive, then they're just not listening. I got a knock on the door earlier this week back there by my office, and a man named Daryl White was driving by, and he stopped. He had seen the sign at the corner down here for the Christian church about a block down the road, and he thought this was it, so he pulled in here first. No coincidence. And I said, no, we're the Church of Christ, and pointed to the sign. Oh yeah, okay, I just got confused. I said, well, that's fine, what's going on? And he said that he'd been in Ohio visiting family. His mother and siblings lived there, and he lived with his dad in Albuquerque. He was driving back home to Albuquerque, and he had stayed in Ohio longer than he had intended to stay, and he was running short of travel money. He was asking if the church could help him get some gas in his vehicle to get back home. And I said, sure, we have a habit of doing that. So I talked with him for a little bit, and we ended up going up to the quick shop over on the other side of the highway. And as we were filling up his vehicle, I was talking with him, getting a little bit more about his story and asking him, where he had been and how long he lived in Albuquerque and things like that, just sort of some small talk. And I asked him a little bit about his faith, and he said, yeah, I used to go with my mom to church for a little bit. And so we talked a little bit about those kind of things, and he asked me to pray for his father, that he was in very poor health and starting to get dementia. I said, certainly I'll do that, and paid for the gas, and he went on his way. And I asked him some of those questions, and I talked with him for a few minutes, but in all of that, I didn't ask him specifically if he wanted to study the Bible or wanted some information or even had a Bible of his own. And as I was driving back to the building here, I felt really ashamed. And I thought, I did it again. Got busy thinking about things I needed to do this afternoon before I drove home, thinking about his situation, and just got distracted by that. And I thought, that was a missed opportunity. And I felt bad for that. And I even got a little bit of a chill that ran down between my shoulder blades, because I wondered in those situations, which this is not the first one, I'm sad to say it probably won't be the last. But in those situations, I have to wonder sometimes, am I going to stand before God on Judgment Day and have to answer for Daryl? Is God going to ask me, why didn't you mention me to him? Why didn't you talk a little bit more about his soul? And it's sad. It's a sad fact. It's a tragedy that many times we only recognize the value of an opportunity when we miss them. All we can do is hope to do better next time and learn from those mistakes. But God gives us chances to talk to people about Him every single day. But are we observant enough? Are we paying close enough attention? And are we courageous enough to take advantage of those opportunities? We're going to read about a church tonight that was courageous enough to take advantage of those opportunities when they were presented to them. Revelation chapter 3, turn there if you're not already there. We're going to read about the church in a place called Philadelphia. Revelation chapter 3, beginning in verse 7. This is the sixth, next to last of the 7 letters to the churches of Asia that cover just about every kind of situation a church might find itself in. And here we have a good church that we're going to talk about tonight. Revelation 3 and verse 7. And to the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these things says he who is holy, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens and no one shuts, and shuts and no one opens. I know your works. See, I have set before you an open door, and no one can shut it. For you have a little strength, have kept my word, and have not denied my name. Indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan, who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. Because you have kept my command to persevere, I also will keep you from the hour of trial which shall come upon the whole world, to test those who dwell on the earth. Behold, I am coming quickly. Hold fast to what you have, that no one may take your crown. He who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go out no more. I will write on him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God. And I will write on him my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. This letter follows the same pattern that we've seen in all of the letters, which helps us in our understanding. It helps us sort of organize these thoughts into some digestible bites. And you'll see a pattern here in this letter. First, we see that the letter to Philadelphia shows us that Christ opens doors of opportunity for his people. And he praises those who take advantage of this opportunity. Also shows that he is aware of the problems that they face as a church, and he encourages them with the prescription to remain faithful. And he promises them many rich rewards if they will remain faithful. So when we read about the church in Philadelphia, we should also be encouraged to follow their example and to follow Jesus' instructions so that we might be blessed as well. So let's begin, as we have in this series, with the profile of the city and the picture of Christ that is found in the first verse. A little background on the city of Philadelphia. The word, it's a Greek name. It literally means love of brothers, brotherly love. The city of brotherly love. You may have heard the Philadelphia that we have here in the United States described that way. It is called the city of brotherly love because that's what it means. The city was named that by one of the local kings of the area. The name is probably something unfamiliar to you at any rate, but he named the city after his own brother because of his dedicated loyalty to his brother, the king. So he named this city in honor of his brother's love and loyalty to him. It was located at a crossroads of commerce. So there was a lot of traffic, a lot of merchants coming through there. But it wasn't really a rich city, as we've seen some of the others, very rich and prosperous. And one of the reasons perhaps why the city wasn't very wealthy was because it was in an area that was plagued by earthquakes. They would build the city up, and they would have an earthquake, and it would topple everything down. They'd build it back up, and another earthquake would knock it all back down, and they did this several times. Certainly would have been frustrating and expensive. That may be why the city and even the church that is found there was so poor and so small. But we see great encouragement here with the church in Philadelphia, because although it is small and although it seems to lack power and influence and fame, there are still great opportunities provided to it. The picture of Christ that we see, that we find in verse 7, he's referred to as the one who is holy. This would be a reference to the deity of Christ, that he is not just a good man, a good moral teacher, a rabbi, but rather he is God in the flesh. He is holy. He alone is holy. He is also depicted as the one who is true. We might say that he is the one who is dependable. He is true, whereas others are false. Dependable. Again, this is an area with lots of earthquakes, indicating here that Jesus would be the firm foundation. He is not like the shaky ground that surrounds them, but rather he is true and firm and dependable and stable. He is also described as the one who has the key of David. Jesus was the one foretold in prophecies that would be the descendant of David that would sit upon the throne that would last forever. And this quotation that Jesus gives of himself here is a quote from Isaiah chapter 22 and verse 22, that he is the one who shuts and opens. And no one is able to open what he has shut, and no one is able to shut what he has opened. Very encouraging, showing the power and authority of Jesus here in all of this. Similar to what Jesus had said before in John chapter 14 and verse 6, when he said, "No one comes to the Father but through me." He alone has that authority and that power. And certainly, Jesus wants people to come to the Father through him. So Christ here, as the one who is holy and true, is never unrighteous in any way, certainly never unjust about those to whom he grants or refuses admittance into the kingdom. It's his door. He controls the traffic through that door, but he is holy and he is true. And he will not keep those out who want to be in, and he will not force anyone in who doesn't want to be in. Now the church in Philadelphia has led others to that door of salvation, and Christ praises them for it. In verse 8 we see that there is praise that he gives to the church. And he says there is an open door before them. He has set before them an open door. Now if we look down after the letters in chapter 4 of Revelation in verse 1, we see that there is a door standing open in heaven. So certainly the door is open to the church. To those Christians there, they have access to God for themselves, which is a good thing. But even more than that, what Jesus is saying is they have an opportunity here to help spread the gospel, to help others find that door and find their way through it. Remember, they're situated at a crossroads, lots of traffic, lots of opportunity to talk to folks and introduce them to Jesus if they've not known him. Paul spoke about these kinds of opportunities like in 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verse 9, where he says, "A door of opportunity has been opened to me." He was in Ephesus at this time. We know that he stayed in Ephesus for 3 years. That was a pretty good opportunity, pretty good open door for Paul there. And many were converted during his time teaching at the school of Tyrannus. Paul also says in Philippians chapter 1 and verse 12, and we have to remember at this time that Paul is in prison, what we might call house arrest. And he is preaching while he is in prison. And he said that this is another opportunity he's taking advantage of. In Philippians chapter 1 and verse 12, Paul writes to the church in Philippi, "But I want you to know, brethren, that the things which happened to me have actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel, so that it has become evident to the whole palace guard and all the rest that my chains are in Christ." So Paul is preaching to his guards. And he said, everybody in the whole palace knows that I'm suffering for Christ. And that is something that glorifies him and spreads the gospel. So he took advantage of this. He saw an opportunity, an open door, if you will. And he's making use of it. He says something very similar in his letter to the church in Colossae, in Colossians chapter 4 and verse 3. "Meanwhile, praying also for us, that God would open to us a door for the word, to speak the mystery of Christ, for which I am also in chains, that I may make it manifest as I ought to speak. Walk in wisdom toward those who are outside, redeeming the time." Redeeming the time means spending it wisely, recognizing the value of the short time that we have. Paul was taking advantage of the time that he had. And he's still looking for opportunity. He's praying for even more opportunities. Well, the church in Philadelphia had taken advantage of those open doors, and Jesus is giving them praise for that. The door that had been opened to them is the doorway to salvation, and that, of course, is Christianity itself. And we, as Christians, are to guide others to that door and to lead them through it. And that's what the church in Philadelphia had done a good job of doing, that earned them praise from our Lord. But he recognized that they have a little strength. And this is even more praise. It would have been expected of a large, wealthy, influential, powerful church. But for such a small, insignificant seeming group to have this kind of effect is even more remarkable. And Jesus said, even though you have a little strength, you've done great things. He had said in Matthew chapter 25, during his ministry, that he said, those who are faithful with a little will receive more. Telling the parable of the talents, you've been faithful in a little, so I will give you much more. And this church here that had been faithful in the little opportunity they had taken advantage of it, and had capitalized on it, and Jesus said, I'm going to give you even more opportunities. He praises them because they had kept His word. This was no small task, because they are in a place where they're feeling the pinch between two opposing forces that are united against them. They're feeling pressure from the Roman government. They're also feeling pressure from the Jews in that area, who see them as an offshoot, a sect, as heretics, false teachers, twisting Judaism as the true religion as they see it. So they're getting it from both sides, and they're caught in the middle. And Jesus praises them that even in this situation of persecution, they have kept His word. He said, "You have not denied my name." This would be a reference to the emperor worship, which is prevalent in that area, really all throughout the empire, but especially as we see it here in the letters to the churches of Asia, where again there were shrines and altars set up to the emperor. The emperor was to be worshipped as a god, and every citizen of that region would have to come by. There was a bowl of incense next to a burning censer of coals, and you have to throw a pinch of incense on the hot coals and say, "Caesar is Lord." Well, Christians could not do this because Caesar is not Lord. Jesus is Lord. And this branded them as rebels and as traitors to the empire, and even in danger of having their property seized and even their lives. And Jesus says, "You have not denied my name." So He praises them. Jesus has nothing but praise for this church. This is one of the only churches other than the church in Smyrna that also has nothing but good news from Jesus. There is no rebuke. There is no complaint. Normally in the format of the letters there would be a problem that needs addressing, but Jesus comes not to His problem with them, but rather the problems that they are going to continue to face in verses 9 through 11. And He's telling them these things to warn them. He's telling them so that they will understand. It's always good to know what's ahead of you, even if it's unpleasant. At least you can prepare yourself. You can be informed. You can be equipped to deal with it. It won't catch you off guard. So He's trying to prepare them for this. And He refers to a group that He calls the synagogue of Satan. He's used this terminology before, but these seem to be those who are still holding to Judaism, claiming to follow the one true God, and yet rejecting the words of that one true God in the form of the gospel. So He said, they say they're Jews, but they're really not. Well, Jesus, how can you say that? Well, He knows the hearts of men. He knows what their motivations are, but we don't even need the omniscience of Jesus to determine this, because if they were sincere, if they were true followers of the Lord Jehovah, then they would have followed the teaching of Jesus as the fulfillment of the law and the fulfillment of all of those prophecies. So Jesus knows that they are insincere in claiming to follow Judaism because their devotion to the Old Testament has not led them to Christ as it should have by now, by this time. So He's fully justified in calling them out in this way. And He warns them of an hour of trial. History tells us that shortly after this, during this time, there was a period of great and severe persecution under the Roman Emperor Domitian. Many Christians were slaughtered. It could be that's what's being referred to here, but certainly there was no shortage of any time of persecution for Christians during the time of the Roman Empire. And He also warns them to be faithful, to be committed, to keep doing what they've been doing, because there may be a danger of losing their crown. He said, you've got the crown now, don't lose it, don't jeopardize it, don't give up now. These tests that will come upon them will challenge their faith, but Jesus tells them how they can overcome it. He gives them the prescription in verse 11. First of all, He tells them, I'm coming quickly, so there is the hope that is given of His return. But He also gives them encouragement. He encourages the church there because they have shown true brotherly love. They have lived up to the namesake of the city they live within. They have shown love for their brothers by sharing the gospel with them. And He tells them, hold fast to what you have. He said, take it in your hands and squeeze as hard as you can and don't let go. It's very similar to what God told Paul when Paul had prayed that he might be healed of whatever the affliction he was suffering, and God told him, my grace is sufficient for you. Jesus is saying, It may not seem like you have a lot, but you've got enough. So just hold on to it, and it will see you through. Again, there is no rebuke for any sin, but there is a warning to the church there to remain faithful. He said, you are faithful, keep it that way. If the church in Philadelphia holds on to Jesus, he promises them an amazing list of blessings that we see in verse 12. First of all, he says that no one will shut the door that has been opened to them. Now, we can see this in many ways. Certainly, the door to heaven would never be shut on them if they remain faithful. But he might also be referring to the opportunities that he mentioned back in verse 8. Those open doors. He said these opportunities are going to keep coming. And that is certainly a blessing, an opportunity to serve God, to reach others with the saving message of the gospel, and to see them saved as well. It's a great blessing. Jesus said no one's going to take these opportunities from you. They will continue. And he says, don't worry about your enemies, those who are persecuting you, those who are making your lives difficult, because they will be brought before you. He said they will be made to kneel before you. Could be speaking metaphorically here. We have to remember Revelation is an apocalyptic writing, a bit poetic. They may not literally be forced to their knees before these Christians in their lifetime, but certainly at the final judgment, if not before, they will be rectified. The situation will be brought to justice. God will see justice done. We might even go so far as to say vengeance. They were persecuting these Christians. They were tormenting them and even killing them. And they should take comfort in knowing that God is going to right every wrong that's been done against them. Jesus says that he will affirm his love for them publicly. They have not been ashamed of his name, and he will not be ashamed of them either. But he will proudly proclaim them as his own on that day in the very face of their enemies. And he says you will be preserved during the time of trial. They're going to face even more trials. They would face severe persecution from Rome, but he said it's not going to destroy you. He said you will be preserved. You will be saved from this. It won't be the end. Certainly that will also continue in the final judgment. They will not face the final judgment. They will not be cast away from God and destroyed, but no. They will not be condemned, but they will be preserved in that time of final judgment. Now here's an interesting one. He says that they will be, to the one that is faithful, to the one that overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the heavenly temple of my Father. What do you think of when you think of a pillar? You can go over into the old parts of the world and see the ruins in many cities, and walls have fallen down, the roofs have caved in, and many times the only thing left is those columns, those pillars that are standing there. We think of a pillar as something that is established, that is grounded, that is solid, permanent, unshakable. Again, this is a place where there's a lot of earthquakes. Jesus said, you've been on some shaky ground, but you're going to be a pillar in the temple of my Father. And you will never go out. There is that idea of permanence and security. A great blessing there with the rich imagery connected to it. And then there's mention of the name of God here. I will write on him the name of my God. The idea that we are in the family of God, that we bear that family name. The name of the New Jerusalem, the heavenly city, indicating citizenship in that city. And even the name of Christ himself, the one who saved them, the one who had brought that victory. Now we read in Scripture about the church in Antioch that sent Paul and Barnabas and Silas, and likely many others, on missionary journeys to spread the gospel. And when Paul stayed 3 years preaching and teaching in the school of Tyrannus in Ephesus, Scripture tells us about that occurrence. And as a result of his time in Ephesus, Paul wrote that all of Asia, this area here covered by the 7 churches, all of Asia heard the gospel. Everybody was exposed to it. We might ask the question sometime that, could Newton, Kansas, could the Old Main Church of Christ ever hope to be such a powerful voice for the gospel of Christ? I mean, what can we do Please remember here that the smallest and the poorest church of the seven received the best commendation from Jesus because they were faithful and they used their opportunities. It makes me think of what Jesus said to Mary, the sister of Lazarus, when she had anointed him with that expensive oil. It seemed like a wasteful and an insignificant gift, but he praised her and he said, "She has done what she could." And that's all that God requires of us. No more, certainly no less. So let us simply do what we can for Jesus when we can. Let us always be on the lookout for opportunities to serve Him and to share the gospel with others. Let us be attentive to see those doors when they are open. God will give us opportunities as Christians, and He gives all people the opportunity to become a Christian. He offers salvation as a free gift to those who will take advantage of it, to those who believe in His Son, who repent of their sins, who confess Jesus as Lord, and who are baptized, immersed in water that their sins might be washed away. And maybe someone here needs to do that tonight. Or maybe you need the prayers of the church. Maybe you've seen the standard that is set here by the challenge that is issued by the faithful brethren in the church in Philadelphia. And you see maybe you've been falling down in that. You want to rise to that standard. You want God to help you be more aware of others and their need for Christ. If you need any of those things, if we can pray for you tonight, if we can encourage you, please come make that need known as we stand and sing this song. Please come.
Softly and tenderly, Jesus.